How do you configure Webpack using Webpack.config.js and JavaScript? Imagine building a web project where everything fits perfectly together, like assembling a puzzle. That's what configuring Webpack helps you do. Webpack is a tool that bundles your JavaScript files and assets into a single file or set of files, making your website load faster and work smoothly. To set it up, you create a special JavaScript file called Webpack.config.js. This file tells Webpack how to handle your project. First, you start by creating the Webpack.config.js file in your project's root folder. Think of it as giving Webpack a map of your project. Inside this file, you export an object with all your settings. The first thing you specify is the entry point. This is the main JavaScript file Webpack begins with, like telling it where to start. For example, you write entry/index.js. This means Webpack will look at the index.js file inside the SRC folder to start building your dependency graph. Next, you define the output. This is where Webpack saves the bundled files. You set the path to a folder like dist, which is short for distribution, and give your bundle a name like bundle.js. To do this, you need to requiring the path module from Node.js and write output. Path, resolve dir name dist, file name, bundle.js. This way, Webpack knows exactly where to put your final file. You also choose a mode. If you want unminified code with source maps for debugging, pick development mode. For optimized, smaller files for production, choose production mode. Just write mode, development, or mode, production. Handling different file types is important. Webpack uses loaders for this. For example, to process CSS files, you add a rule that matches CSS files and applies style loader and CSS loader. For TypeScript files, you use TS loader. You add these rules inside a module rules array. Plugins add extra features. For example, to generate an HTML file that includes your bundle automatically, you use HTML Webpack plugin. You requiring it at the top and add it to the plugins array. This plugin creates an HTML file based on a template you specify. You can also tell Webpack how to resolve modules. For example, you can add extensions, TS, JS, so Webpack recognizes these file types without needing to specify the extension every time. For easier debugging, you can enable source maps by setting DevTool. Inline source map. To serve your project locally during development, you configure dev server with options like content base, dist. If you want different settings for development and production, you can export multiple configuration objects or create separate files. Then, you run Webpack with the config flag to choose which one to use. Here is a simple example of a Webpack configuration file. You requiring path and HTML Webpack plugin at the top. Then you export an object with mode set to development, entry pointing to your main JavaScript file, output specifying the folder and file name, rules for CSS, plugins for HTML, source maps, and a development server setup. In short, setting up Webpack with Webpack.config.js involves creating a JavaScript file that exports an object. This object tells Webpack where to start, where to save files, how to handle different types of files, and what extra features to include. This setup makes your web development process smoother and your websites faster and more organized.